In this video, we'll talk about how to calculate nominal and real GDP using some data that is given to us. So here we have a table that shows you some data for an economy that produces only two goods: masks and sanitizers. Okay, really important goods. But for now, we're only assuming that these are the only two goods that are being produced. In practice, however, in any economy, there are thousands and thousands of goods and services that are produced. Okay, so the table also shows you the prices and quantities of each of these two goods in these different years that are depicted in this first column. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to calculate nominal GDP and real GDP. Remember that GDP is, no matter what type of GDP it is always going to be computed in a given period of time. So usually those periods of time or the intervals are yearly or annually. Okay, so we have these 3 years, and we're going to be computing nominal GDP for those 3 years and real GDP for 3 years. Okay, it could also be a quarter, but for now the data is annual, so we are going to be computing this annually. So recall that nominal GDP uses the current year prices, which is to say, when we're calculating nominal GDP for any year, we are going to use the prices from that very year. However, when we are talking about real GDP, we are going to use base year prices. And typically this base year is given to you in any question, and we're going to assume for our question that the base year is 2019. Okay, this can be anything else. It can be 2020 or 2021. The idea here is just that we are holding the prices from that base year to be constant when we're computing real GDP. Okay, so to compute total spending in this economy, let's write down first, if we were trying to calculate nominal GDP in 2019, nominal GDP in 2020, and nominal GDP in 2021, how would we go about this? So we're given prices and quantities. So to compute total spending or total expenditure, which is what we can capture by the expenditure approach, we would simply multiply the quantities of each good, masks or sanitizers, with the prices. Okay, so what we want to do is P times Q plus P times Q. Okay, so for 2019, you're just going to look at that row. Okay, and what we would have is one mask costs $1 times we are producing 100 masks. So the value of those masks is $100, plus we have sanitizers that we are producing, and the value of those sanitizers are $2 per sanitizer times 50 sanitizers. Okay, so that gives you $200. And so $200 is the nominal GDP for this economy in the year 2019. Okay, similarly, we are going to take each row at a time and compute nominal GDP for the next 2 years. So we have $2 for a mask times 150 masks that we are producing, times $3 for a sanitizer times 100 sanitizers that we are producing, and this is going to be equal to 600. And if you calculate that for 2021, then this is $3 for a mask times 200 masks. So again, P times Q plus $4 for sanitizer times 150 sanitizers. And this is equal to $1,200. Okay. So now we have three different values for 3 different years that represents the nominal GDP. And what you can see is nominal GDP or total spending rose from 2019 to 2020 and then rose again from 2020 to 2021. Okay, now part of this increase can be attributed to the increase in the quantities of masks and sanitizers, and part of it is attributable to the increase in the prices of masks and sanitizers. Okay, so when we're trying to say that our GDP is growing, we might actually get the wrong picture about whether our economy is really growing or not. When we want to understand whether the economy is really growing, we might want to just focus on, are we really producing more? Okay, so is quantity across time more in the economy, not necessarily prices. So for that reason, we are going to obtain a measure which is not affected by changes in prices. Okay, and so for that reason, we will compute real GDP. And so let's write this down. Real GDP can be computed. So we'll write down each row. Oops, this should be 2019 first. 19, 2020, and real GDP in 2021. Okay. And so remember that we are using prices from the base year, and the base year is 2019. So what I like to do is literally copy and paste the prices of masks and sanitizers, or whatever good you would be given in your question, across the different years. So when it comes to 2019, obviously those prices are going to be for the year 2019, but then we're going to copy paste these prices across different years. Okay, now we've copy pasted these prices, and these prices are always from the base year when we're computing real GDP. So now we're just going to take the same quantities from that year. So 2019 quantities are 100 masks and 50 sanitizers. So that gives you a value of $200. Okay, and we have 150 masks and 100 sanitizers in 2020. So that's going to give you a value of 350. And finally, we have 200 masks and 150 sanitizers, which gives us a value of 500. Okay, and so we can see that there are a couple of things to note here. First, that if you look at the base year, which is 2019, okay, we look at this value right here. Let me mark this with a different color so it's obvious. If you look at these two values, okay, $200, $200, this is exactly the same. Okay, so remember that if you are given a base year, nominal and real GDP is going to be exactly the same. So nominal GDP equals a real GDP for the base year, whatever the base year, okay, because the prices are going to be the same. And you're obviously taking quantities from that year. But notice when we're computing real GDP, the real GDP is also rising from one year to the next, but the change is not that much. Okay, it's less than before, let's say, when we are comparing this to nominal GDP. And this is happening because the increase in real GDP can be attributable to an increase in quantities that are produced of masks and sanitizers only, because we are fixing the price of these goods. Okay, so to sum up, nominal GDP uses current prices to place a value on the economy's production of goods and services, whereas real GDP uses constant base year prices to place a value on the economy's production of goods and services. And because real GDP is not affected by changes in prices, we're keeping those constant, the changes in real GDP only reflect changes in the amounts being produced. And this is what we really want to know when we are trying to understand how well the economy is performing. And so very often when you see in the news or in the media, if GDP is being reported across time, or we are talking about how the economy is growing, all of those reports are referring to real GDP and not nominal GDP, because it is really trying to understand whether the economy's production of goods and services is going up over time or not, and whether the economy is able to satisfy people's needs and desires.